Hello friends, Tal here, and welcome to my very first Legion video. Yes, it's been a long time since I made any content. The expansion's been out for about 2 weeks. I've been super busy getting myself geared up, getting myself raid ready, doing a bunch of stuff. And more importantly than that, I've been leveling some of my characters, trying to get them to 110 so I can make content for you guys after knowing a little bit about what I'm talking about. But anyways, guys, today we're going to be taking a look at my current main for the expansion as of right now, my Guardian Druid. And very first, I'm going to go ahead and show, I have a lot of gear on this guy. I even have a legendary. I'm pretty geared on this guy. Keep that in mind for everything that I'm going to be talking about. But I'm not going to go into too many crazy things. I'm just going to be talking about how the class works, what you need to know. This is a pre-raid guide. Basically, the basics. Just what you need to know if you're jumping into this, if you want to know how it plays, if you want to know what you need to know to go in and do some dungeons and have some fun. So first of all, we're going to be talking about the class mechanics. And essentially, as a Guardian Druid, it's pretty basic. There's not too much stuff that you have to worry about. You generate rage by using Mangle and Thrash for the most part. You have some talent to change things up a little bit, but you're going to be using that rage on Iron Fur or Frenzied Regeneration or Mark of Ursol. Basically, if it's physical damage, you have Iron Fur up, and for the most part, you have Iron Fur up all the time anyways. It's not hard to maintain it. If it's magical damage, you use it on Mark of Ursol, which is going to reduce magical damage you take by 30% for 6 seconds. Both Iron Fur and Mark of Ursol have the same rage cost, so it's 45. And when you need a little bit of a heal, you use Frenzied Regen, which is 10 rage. It's going to heal you for 50% of all damage taken in the last 5 seconds over 3 seconds, minimum of 5% of your maximum health. Again, everyone, I've gotten into a little bit of a fight with people here in the comments. Frenzied Regen is a shit heal. I do not take this back. I do not regret saying it. I will say it till the end of the day. But you're not a self-healing tank. You don't need this to be a great heal. Okay, I even have artifact traits that increase this. Honestly, it's a shit heal. If you don't agree with me, that's fine, but I'm going to keep saying it. But you don't need it to be a good heal because at the end of the day, it does its job. You take a massive hit, you use it, you heal some of that back up, you're fine. You won't have to worry about it. Unless you get the legendary, which makes the heal like 12% of your maximum health. That's pretty freaking insane. I can't wait. I hope I get that someday, but then it won't be a shit spell. But, you're not going to rely on a legendary. Use Swipe as your filler. You keep Moonfire up on the target, and then you have an assortment of cooldowns and abilities that you can use to take care of things. At the end of the day, the way the Guardian Druid works is by being a meat shield. You have a bunch of health, you get increased healing on every single healer's spells, and you're a bear. You do your job, and you do it well. So we're going to quickly go over some of the abilities right now, just basically things that you guys need to know. So Bark Skin is going to be like your sort of minor cooldown. It's just going to reduce all damage that you take by 20%. You can use it when you're stunned. You can use it when you're incapacitated, all that kind of daze stuff. I actually don't know about daze. I haven't checked that out yet. But it's your small cooldown. You kind of use it all the time. It's usually up all the time. And it does have a bit of a weird cooldown because artifact traits and other things reduce it even more. But it's up all the time. You use it as much as you want. Bear form, of course, is what you're going to be tanking in. It's going to increase your armor. It's going to increase your stamina. It's going to make you immune to polymorph effects, everything like that. Keep in mind, power shifting is gone as a thing. I haven't been playing a Druid until this expansion, so I really wasn't too aware of it. But if you've played a Druid in other expansions, there is a cooldown when you shapeshift. So you can't just shift back and forth as much as you want. There's no macro that's going to let you do it. Keep that in mind. If you shift out of your bear form, there's going to be like 3 seconds before you can shift back into it and be fine. Keep that in mind. So we already talked about Frenzied Regen. It's your heal. Use it after you take a big hit. Growl is your taunt. Healing Touch, you just have that baseline. It heals for a little bit. It's not a big deal. Dash will activate cat form. Okay? Do not use it when you are actively tanking something because, first of all, if you're running away from something, you have to make sure it doesn't hit you in the back. But if you're in cat form when it hits you, it's going to truck you. Be careful with that. Incapacitating Roar is still here. It's just going to disorient or incapacitate everything around you for a couple seconds. It breaks on instantly. It's really, really good for quickly interrupting a cast if you don't have an interrupt or anything like that. But otherwise, Incapacitating Roar is kind of shit. You still have Entangling Roots. We talked about Iron Fur. You keep this up basically all the time. And the special thing about it is that it can stack. So you can have 2, 3, 4 stacks of Iron Fur. You're reducing a bunch of the damage that you take. And for the most part, you only really want to stack it like that when there's a big hit that's coming. Otherwise, just keep one rolling. It's easy enough. Just manage your rage. Mangle is still here. It's basically what you're going to be using on cooldown. It gives you a lot of rage. It does a lot of damage. Just use it on cooldown. And it can proc so that you can use it more often. Rage of the Sleeper is your artifact ability. This is a 1.5 minute cooldown, and it basically makes you unkillable. It's going to baseline, prevent 25% of all damage you take, and reflect it back at your attackers. With an artifact trait called Embrace of the Nightmare, it gets kind of ridiculous. But that's artifact traits. We're going to talk about that in just a second. First, let's go through the rest of the spellbook. Mark Reversal, reducing magical damage by 30%. Pretty standard, pretty basic, not too much stuff you have to worry about. You have Iron for all the time. Again, use this when you're going to take magic damage. Easy. Maul is still around, and I still hate it to death. It has a cooldown for a Rage Dump, which doesn't make sense to me, but it has one, and it's just going to do some damage. You do not, and I repeat, you do not use Maul unless you are absolutely sure that you can afford the rage cost. It's 20 rage. It's half of an Iron for, half of a Mark Reversal. And if you get too spammy with this, you're not going to have rage for anything. Keep that in mind. For the most part, you can usually just ignore it. It's only when you're capping rage and doing some other things like that where you're going to want to use Maul. Or if you're bearcatting, which we're also going to talk about. Rebirth is your battle res. It's really good. Nothing to really talk about there. Have it bound somewhere. Make sure you use it. Use it intelligently. It's nice to have a battle res. It does cost 10 rage, so keep that in mind. You can still remove curses and poisons. You have Moonfire, which, yes, you will use. Keep it up on your target, or as many targets as you can. Just keep it up on the target. It's not like a filler where you're going to spam it. You just keep it up and don't worry about it. You can still res people. You still have what is it called? Stealth with activate your cat form. Again, it can only be done when you're outside of combat, so you don't have to worry about accidentally dropping into cat form, but just keep that in mind. You still have travel form. Skull Bash is still a charge plus an interrupt. I hate that because I don't like using Skull Bash as a charge, but keep in mind it does function in that matter, but it's your interrupt. Use it to interrupt things. In Legion, it's very, very important. What I've noticed more than anything is the dungeons are not difficult, but there's a lot more things you have to deal with. There's a lot of knowing what a spell is going to do, which mobs in a spell, in a group of trash or anything is going to have like a heal or a disorient, something like that. Keep that in mind. Interrupting is more important now than it's been in any other expansion, so you're going to want to go ahead and get that done. You still have Stampeding Roar. You, along with, I think, Feral Druids, are the only classes that have Stampeding Roar, and it's a big freaking deal. Giving your entire group, your entire raid, 60% movement speed for 8 seconds is a big deal. Have that bound and use it. Survival Instance is your shield wall. It's a 4-minute recharge, and you have 2 charges. It's going to reduce all damage you take by 50% for 6 seconds. You see mine says 56%, but that's artifact traits. I mean, not much to say there. It doesn't last for very long compared to some of the other shield walls and other things like that, but you basically use it for a big hit. It's 50% damage reduction. It's huge. It's not too glamorous. It's not too special. Nothing to think about. Just use it when you need to use it. And keep in mind that it does have 2 charges. So maybe if you find yourself realizing you're not using it as often, maybe pull a bigger mob, pull a bigger group of things, use it once, have 1 charge going. In raids, obviously, you're going to use it on very specific moments. But keep in mind 2 charges. Use it every once in a while. Gore is your passive, and you have to pay attention to this. Thrash, Swipe, and Moonfire have a 20% chance to reset the cooldown on Mangle and cause it to generate an additional 4 rage. Mangle does the most damage out of all your abilities, and it gives you the most rage. So when Mangle is up, use Mangle. Keep it on cooldown as much as possible. Swipe is your filler. Even on single target, you just use Swipe as much as you possibly can. It costs nothing. It does damage. It has a chance to proc Gore. Just use it. No reason not to. And now, your Mastery. Your Mastery is Nature's Guardian. It's going to increase your maximum health and your healing received by a percentage, as well as increasing your attack power. This is a very powerful thing. It is what makes you being a meat shield viable. Now, usually, or before in the past at least, stacking stamina like crazy, being a giant meat shield, that wasn't helping healers because it expends more of their mana to get you at a safer health percentage. With this Mastery, though, the bigger that your health pool gets, which, keep in mind, as a Guardian Druid, as long as you're stacking Mastery and everything, you will have more health than any other tank. You just will. But your heals from your healers are still going to do, on average, the same amount on you as they will on other tanks, because you're also boosting their heals. It does show up as yours in this, like Skada or anything like that. It shows up as Nature's Guardian. You can see how much healing it's doing to you. It's pretty crazy, especially with HOTS and things like that. Fantastic Mastery. Really, really like it. Thrash is another ability you're going to be using on cooldown. It's just going to do a bunch of AoE damage. It's going to put a dot on everybody. It's going to do bleed damage. You can stack it up to 3 times, and it generates you rage. This, along with Mangle, you basically just keep on cooldown. And then you have a passive Thick Hide, which is going to reduce all damage taken by 10%. So there you go. That's your abilities. That's your spells. Again, it basically boils down to Thrash and Mangle on cooldown. Use Rage on Iron Fur, Mark of Versal when you need to, Frenzied Regen when you need to. Keep Iron Fur up basically all the time. Stack Iron Fur for big physical damage hits. Keep Moonfire up. And swipe for your filler. Very, very basic. Not too much they have to worry about. Not too much you have to think about. Rage of the Sleeper is just another cooldown that you can use. Reflecting damage. You can do some damage, especially in AoE. It's really, really cool. But that's that. As far as stats go, survivability-wise, what you want to go for is either versatility or mastery, and then you go into things like haste and crit. Versatility and mastery is very interchangeable. They do similar things. Versatility is going to increase your damage and your healing done, as well as decrease your damage taken. And mastery is just going to give you that extra health, the extra healing from any source, things like that. So basically, you either choose if you want to stack versatility or you choose if you want to stack mastery. And then your second stat is the one that you didn't stack, and then haste, and then crit. Pretty simple, pretty basic. I've gone for mastery. As you can see here, my gems are mastery. I've tried to get, I have some crafted pieces, for example, my boots, which I got to roll all mastery. Is basically what I've decided to do. I believe that versatility will be better for mythic pluses and 5-mans, and mastery will be better for raids. It just kind of depends what you're going to choose, but those are your two best stats. And then you go into haste, and then you go into crit. Crit is a purely offensive stat. If you stack that, it's you just want to do extra damage. As far as enchants go, though, they have a couple of unique enchants this expansion. There's no weapon enchants, so you don't have to worry about that. But for example, on your back, you're going to be doing the Binding of Agility or the Word of Agility, which is just cheaper. You can see that I don't have any of my stuff enchanted because I'm getting new gear all the time. I'm going to wait to enchant my gear until like right before raids, or Mythic Pluses, I should say. So next Tuesday will be when I go ahead and enchant my stuff. But you want to put Agility on your back. On your rings, you will put either Versatility or you will put Mastery. So it's Binding of Versatility or Binding of Mastery. And your next slot's where you have choice. Now for survivability, which is what I'm going to preach until you get geared up and stuff, you want to take Mark of the Heavy Hide, which is going to sometimes increase your armor by 3,000 for 10 seconds. It goes on your neck. But you do have other options. You have one that summons some dryads to do some damage. You have one that like rains down damage with arrows and things like that. It's up to you, but again, we're tanks. I'm focusing on the survivability. You can go for the more damagey route, but that's once you're geared up enough, and this is a very basic guide. So far as tanking goes, you take Mark of the Heavy Hide, and you don't worry about that. With all that being said, let's go and take a look at the talents now. You do have some choices, you have some variation here, there's things that you can do, but for the most part, on the first tier, you will be taking Blood Frenzy in any sort of AoE scenario. If there's more than 2 targets, you take Blood Frenzy because using Thrash is just going to give you the most rage, especially with the bleed on it, every single tick. If you're in a big pack of AoE, it's a lot of rage that you generate. If you're doing single target, you take Bristling Fur, as long as that target's going to do a decent amount of damage to you. If you're super crazy geared, the thing's not doing a lot of damage to you, or it's stunned the entire time, or anything like that, Bristling Fur loses a lot of value very, very quickly. But if it's just one big boss, they're hitting you slowly, they're hitting you hard, you take Bristling Fur or Blood Frenzy for AoE scenarios. At the 30 tier, I like Wild Charge. I like having a charge as a bear. But to be honest, in dungeons and in raids, Gutter Roars is going to be the go-to. It's going to increase the radius of Stampeding Roar. It's going to reduce the cooldown of it. And even your Incapacitated Roar gets a little bit of a boost. Overall, Gutter Roars is just better for dungeons, for raids, for everything. Displacer Beast puts you in danger more often than not because it does put you into cat form. But Wild Charge does have its place in solo type scenarios. Now, the 45 tier is where there's going to be some divergence. If you're going full survivability, you just want to live, you take Resto Affinity. The heal is not 3% of your maximum health. That is a lie. The tooltips, there's like a hidden passive that for Guardian Druid, it's only 1.5%. It does not stack every master. It doesn't get higher or anything like that. Even with it only being 1.5% of your maximum health every 5 seconds, it does so much healing. I've been amazed sometimes when I look at my Scott and I see that how much it's actually done just on me. So that's what you want to take for survivability. But if you want to do extra damage, if you want some more ability to switch in and out, and especially in any sort of raid where you have time where there's like a tank swap or anything like that, you're not tanking something the entire time, there's a big case for Feral Affinity. It can do a lot of damage when you're doing bearcatting. or cat weaving as some people are talking. I will show this later on in the video, what it actually requires. I've already done a video before, but I'm going to show it here again because it's a nice jumping off point. It's what you choose if you want to do more damage, if the scenario lets you. If you have a situation where you can go into cat form, you do that. And balance, of course, gives you some of the balance abilities. It's nice to have the extra range of your abilities, but it's not something that I would say is, the best. If you want survivability, resto. If you want damage, feral. That's kind of just the way I believe it's going to end up playing out. Now, the 60 tier is just CC. Whether you want to be able to push things back more often, if you want to go ahead and root it all down in place, or just stun with single target, it's up to you. I think Mighty Bash is the best out of all those because it's a nice long stun, but Typhoon does have its place when you have to constantly be interrupting things. It's on 30-second cooldown. It helps with interrupts if you don't have enough interrupts. Like if you have a large amount of range DPS in a dungeon run or anything, it really helps there. But my go-to is Mighty Bash. Now, the 75 tier is also, again, where you have some choice. For the most part, you run Galactic Guardian all the time. If there's even one additional target, having that free automatic Moonfire gives you a lot of damage, but it also lets you have more rage generation because of the Moonfire that procs on you. I like Galactic Guardian, it's the best. Incarnation is purely a DPS talent. It can give you some moments of bursty rage, and it's all good and everything like that, but it's for the most part just the DPS talent. I wouldn't take it for survivability. Galactic Guardian just gives you so much more rage over the course of a fight. And Soul of the Forest is another option for more rage on a single target. If you just want some survivability, I would maybe go Soul of the Forest for single target over Galactic Guardian. But Galactic Guardian basically scales out of control as long as there's adds. If there's more than one target, Galactic Guardian all the way. And I also have the scenario that Incarnation Guardian of Ursoc. I have a couple of artifact relics that increase my thrash damage. As you guys already know, I have a legendary that increases my thrash damage. So in my specific scenario, I think that my thrash actually does more damage than my mangle. So whereas usually when you use Incarnation, you want to spam mangle for a lot of damage and a lot of rage, I think I would actually benefit better from spamming thrash. And that's going to be very dependent on your artifact relics and legendaries that you get. This expansion is the expansion of RNG loot. So things do change around depending on what you get. But again, Galactic Guardian is go-to. On the 90 tier, it's going to depend on what you're doing. Earth Warden is good for single target fights that hit you very hard. If there's more than one target, immediately drops off in value. Guardian of Elune is a very safe go-to. Mangle increases the duration of Iron Fur, Mark of Versal, or the healing of Frenzied Reju. Pretty good. Basically, it makes you want to use Mangle before you use any of those rage costing abilities, and it's very easy to do. Mangle is up all the time. It has a base cooldown of about 5 seconds reduced by haste, or 6 seconds reduced by haste, and on top of that, it procs and all that kind of stuff. So it's very safe go-to. But if you need your bark skin and your survival instance up more often, specifically if a boss fight requires you to have more external cooldowns or more abilities up all the time, survival of the fittest will be very, very nice to take. As you can see here, it makes my bark skin 52 seconds. It's basically a minute. It's very nice. It's up to you. It's up to what you're doing in the environment, but the safe go-to is Guardian of Elune. And at 100, you kind of ignore Pulverize. It gives you slightly more damage reduction than Rend and Tear, but at the cost of damage and of using your Thrash stacks. It's basically a choice between Rend and Tear and Lunar Beam. Lunar Beam being very specifically, hey, you want some healing. Other than that, you take Rend and Tear because it's going to, Thrash stacks is going to reduce the damage that the target deals to you and increase the damage that you do to the target by 2%. So at 3 stacks, it's 6% damage, 6% damage reduction. Pretty nice, pretty standard, and depending on getting a certain legendary that increases your thrash stacks, if that works with Rend and Tear just becomes the go-to because that's going to make you have a 10% damage reduction, 10% damage done on the target all the time. So that's your talent. It's pretty nice, pretty safe. I went through it all, explains everything very easily. So now let's go ahead and do the artifact traits and the artifact path that you're going to be going. As you can see here, you have a fire artifact relic, a blood artifact relic, and a life artifact relic. And each of those is going to give a random boost to a lot of the different traits. It can never give a boost to the golden trait. But essentially, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the path that you want to take. For the most part, you start off here at Iron Claws. You work your way over to the right. You go Wild Flesh, which is going to increase the healing of Frenzied Regeneration. Then you go up into Perpetual Spring. You go over to Bloody Paws. Put the points into Jagged Claws, and then your first golden talent is Embrace of the Nightmare. This is going to make Rage of the Sleeper crazy. So it's already going to be reducing the damage that you take by 25% and redirecting it as damage done. But on top of that, it's going to increase your damage by 25%. It's going to give you 25% increased leech, and it's also going to make you immune to all effects that cause loss of control of your character. It makes Rage of the Sleeper a ridiculous cooldown. Very, very powerful. It's a great thing to have, and that's why you want to go for it first. Keep in mind though, it's not the most survivable of all the golden talent traits, but because of all the benefits of it, it's what you want to lean towards first, especially if you're going to be going into Mythic Plus dungeons. Once you've reached that, you work your way back down, you take Bear Hug, which is going to increase the chance for Gore to trigger, you take Vicious Bites, Sharpen Instincts, Ursock's Endurance, and you go into Gory Fur. When you get Gory Fur, what I've heard is this procs basically all the time. It's going to give your Mango a 50% chance to reduce the rage cost of your next Iron Fur or Mark Reversal, which is just giving you cheaper and cheaper rage costing abilities. With this trait, I wouldn't be surprised if you can keep a 2-stack of Iron Fur up you all the time, and then you stack it up higher when you're taking a big physical hit, and Mark Reversal might not even cost anything really. It's a very good artifact trait. That's your second golden talent. Then your third is Reinforced Armor. You go into Adaptive Fur, which is just going to have a passive chance to elemental damage, give you a 10% damage reduction against the same element. It's nice. You don't have to track it. It's not a big deal. It's just nice to have. And then finally, you start working your way up. You take Roar of the Crowd, you take Bestial Fortitude, and then you take Mauler very, very last point, because increasing the critical strike chance of Maul by 3% when Maul is already pretty much a piece of shit is not something you really want to do. So that's that. That's the artifact path for the most part that you want to do. You can choose to take Gory Fur first and then work your way to Embrace. I recommend getting Embrace of the Nightmare first. Now we're going to take a look at some of the legendaries, and it's important to keep this in mind because it is a part of the game now. It is something you have to keep in mind. It's something that could affect you or might not affect you depending on either you being lucky or being unlucky. For the most part, if you get a legendary, even if it's a shit legendary, you're going to use it because it's $8.95 versus the current cap of $8.50. When raids are released, which is in a week, all gear can potentially get up to $8.95. So at that point, you'll have a little bit more of a choice in the way you work things out. But for the most part, legendaries are fantastic. Now the neck is just going to give you an absorption shield after 5 seconds, that as long as you haven't taken damage. So while you're currently tanking, it's not going to proc, but when you're not tanking, it could proc. It'll be nice when you taunt swap, things like that. The chest piece is just going to increase the effect of Astral Influence, or basically of the affinity. So the passive bonus, so the range increase, the healing that you're getting, or the movement speed. It's nice. It's not a big deal. It's just something to have. The Lufa wrappings are the ones that I have. It's just going to increase the damage and radius of Thrash by 25%. At this point, with this and some artifact relics, is where I'm starting to see Thrash kind of beating Mangle in damage. But again, it's just a DPS legendary. It's not a big deal. Nothing to think about. And then this waste is going to increase your attacks, cause an additional 30% damage as physical to enemies above 90%. Again, for dungeons, for rage, things don't last over 90% for very long. It's not a big deal. Nothing too much to think about. And then you start getting into the things that you really, really want. So, the legs. Thrash can stack up to 2 more times. If you get this legendary, and it works with Rend and Tear or Blood Frenzy, basically, at that point, Rend and Tear becomes the go-to talent all the time. You're never really going to want to switch into Lunar Beam, even for the healing. It becomes way too strong. It's going to give you 5 stacks of Thrash, which is going to give you 2% for each stack. It ends up being 10% damage reduction, 10% damage done. It's fantastic. Very, very strong legendary. If you get this, you're freaking lucky. And then you have the Skysex Hold, which Frenzied Regen heals you for an additional 12% of your maximum health over 3 seconds. So Frenzied Regen baseline 5% health or 50% of the damage that you take in the last 5 seconds. And this just makes Frenzied Regen even more healing. It's another fantastic legendary. A little bit unnecessary though, if we're totally honest. Bear Druids are not a self-healing tank. They are a damage reduction, damage mitigation tank. They don't have to worry about self-healing themselves. But if you get this, it's a nice bonus. It's just something nice to have. It makes Frenzied Regen even stronger, and then you kind of become the whole package. The ring here, it's only going to give you a 70% increased move speed and 15% haste for 10 seconds. Haste is good for you. It's not the best stat, but it's only when you apply a loss of control effect to an enemy. So when you do Mighty Bash, when you... Actually, I think Mighty Bash might be the only one because it has to be loss of control. I don't think rooting something. I don't think the Incapacitating Roar would probably work. but it's going to depend on that. It's not a legendary you want to get. If you get it, I'm sorry, but I mean, at least it has nice stats, right? And then you have Dual Determination, which is going to give Survival Instincts another charge and recharge 50% faster. Now, while this is really good, you have to keep in mind things like Survival Instincts, your shield walls, your things like that, they're used in specific moments in an encounter. So while it's going to be nice to have another charge, it's not always like the go-to. If you don't need the extra additional charge, I mean, maybe you'll just use it to use it. I feel like, for the most part, the legs, the feet, and then the ring and the loofah wrappings are probably the best to have, and the other ones are just kind of nice in certain situations. Obviously, you want to keep every legendary that you get, put it in your bags. If you get, like, for example, the chest, use the chest, but keep another chest in your bags. If you ever get another one, you want to switch them in and out, things like that. Don't put yourself in a situation where you want to use the legendary, but you don't have an item to cover the legendary you're currently using. Not that you're going to get 2 legendaries. That's crazy in and of itself, but, you know, if it happens, it happens. Perfect. And now I'm just going to quickly explain bearcatting. So for the most part, what you want to do is, if you're in a situation like specifically a raid, keep that in mind. It's really only going to happen in raids. You can use Feral Affinity to do more damage. If you are currently tanking, don't do this because this is going to get you killed. I feel like I need to say this, but, you know, please don't get yourself killed when you're doing like dungeons or anything like that. It's not going to be as viable unless there's a specific scenario. But it's very simple. Essentially, if you're pulling, right, and your other friendly player is pulling the boss first, you're like the off tank in the scenario, you can start in stealth, and you want to use Rake, spam Shred, use up all your energy, go into bear form, maul, thrash, mangle, maul, cat form, put up rip, keep Shred up, and then use all your energy, back into bear, use maul, use your 2 abilities, use your rage, go back into cat, keep up both dots. So there you go. It's very simple. Very, very simple. It's just actually doing it that kind of gets to you. As you saw there, I capped my energy. But it's just a very basic, use your energy, pop back into bear form, use your 2 abilities, and then go back. And once you get to this point, then you can use Ferocious Bites, which I didn't there. And the really, really cool thing is, if the enemy is under 50%, or what is it exactly? If it's under 25% health, then Ferocious Bite is all you're going to use, because it's going to refresh the duration on your rip. And essentially, it's keeping those 2 dots up, going into bear form, using Thrash and Mangle, and in between those 2 using some mauls, using your rage up, and then jumping back into cat form. It's very simple, very basic. It provides a very, very big DPS boost, but it's only when you're not actively tanking. It's going to depend on what the scenarios are. For example, I can tell you right now, in Halls of Valor, when you're doing Odin and he turns you into a Valkyr, at that moment you have so much max health that honestly I just jump into cat form and I start bearcatting. My healer can keep me alive. Odin doesn't do enough damage to kill you when you're in Valkyr form, as long as the rest of your party's alive. That's an easy moment where you can do extra damage at basically no cost. But anyways, guys, that's it. That's my basic Guardian Druid pre-raid guide. It's been a lot of stuff. It's basically just talking about a lot of things, explaining things. But if you want to see a dungeon run, I'm going to record that next. I'm going to go ahead and do that for you guys. I'm also going to be just talking about what I'm doing, what I'm thinking about, the things that I'm kind of managing. And hopefully I'm going to be able to show you a nice scenario where you can bearcat. But anyways, guys, I hope you enjoy this video. And I got to get to the next tanks. Just so you guys know, I basically am playing the tanks through a bunch of mythic dungeons before I make anything on them, because I want to know that I have first-hand experience doing this before I make the video. But anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed it. See you around. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and drop it a like. You can subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content just like this. And I want to thank the time each and every single one of you took out of your day to go ahead and watch this, as well as a very special thank you to my Patreon patrons who continue to make this dream a reality through their monthly continued support. If you'd like to go ahead and become a Patreon patron, you can go ahead and click right there on the logo. It'll take you right to the page. And other than that, you can go ahead and tweet me or follow me at Tauriel here on Twitter. And I hope you guys have a wonderful, fantastic day. See you guys around.
Turns to gray We'll calmly walk away from the fray. When structure falls and all else fails, we will build it once again.